Boom, can y'all hear me? Can you hear me? If so, type it into the chat. Did y'all hear the intro? Let me know. Islam. No? Alright, let me do it real quick. Because that's how I be marking stuff now. Give me 1 second. No, here we go. What did I teach you? You are Duke of New York. You're a number one. I can't hear you. You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one. Peace, peace. Great. Hope everybody's well. We got that out of the way. I think everything is moving. Everybody can still hear me, right? Is it loud? You know how this stuff be. Okay, cool. I hope everybody's been well, inshallah. A lot of wild stuff going on as usual. Another fine day in the apocalypse. As we watch the deterioration of third density going into fourth and fifth. You know, inshallah, some places going quicker than others. However, we're still here, which is a testament to our not only genetic resilience, but our spiritual resilience and the need to foster some sort of sense out of, what we can out of the myriad of lies that we're constantly being bombarded with every day. And the mouthpieces of those lies that go from the people in our family all the way up to, you know, the AI people now. So, anybody else have any questions about anything before we get started? A lot of stuff, as I said, popping off. Somebody said, "Oh, what's up with Elon and Trump?" Um, that's you got to look at it from the perspective of things being of some sort of logical sense. And although I'm not against um the idea that this person is involved, because we did see pictures of him with the dude, and we did see um you know he was at Mar-a-Lago and stuff, but we also know that when he was deposed, he was very forthright and was the only one um that was willing to testify all the way against this nigga, and was the first one to report him to the police and all that. Also, I feel like if they was actually had like stuff like that on him, like, why not use that when they were in control of all of the so-called data to do so? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, they literally framed this nigga in front of our eyes, you know what I mean, for mad years, and created all types of stuff, held up all types of governmental processes while human trafficking and letting insurgents into the country, the same ones that's burning up LA right now. The difference between the LA riots, the so-called rebellion in LA back in the days when I was a kid, and this bullshit is that they couldn't really do nothing to the so-called people in LA was doing that because they was all indigenous people. So government really couldn't really do anything. And of all of the damage and all of that, the only people that really got arrested was the brothers that hit that nigga with the brick. Outside of that white man with the brick out the truck. But outside of that, they ain't really gonna do nothing. In this situation in LA now, this is great because now this means that they could actually really go in on these people. So I feel like if they'd have had some sort of data on him to be able to do anything like that, you know what I mean? They'd have used it when you know what I mean? Like they tried to shoot this nigga. You know what I mean? Like, you mean to tell me you had this dude diddling kids and stuff on tape and you didn't use it? Like you didn't blast it anywhere? Nah. Nah, I think homie is mad because what's happening is JD Vance is a prop who basically came out of nowhere. There's a conspiracy that says he's actually Paul Walker in the mask, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, they basically saying that he basically was funded to become the rock star hillbilly type white Christian nationalist nigga that they could pump out there back in like 2019. No, excuse me, 2016. Because he was against Trump and them before. You know what I mean? And back then he was going under the name Bowell. And then he had another name. It's his whole name. It's like it's like something Bowell Vance. So at one point he was going by Bowell. The other name he was going by whatever. So when they seen that what was going to happen eventually to Biden and Kamala and them, the smart ones decided to start to create a way to insulate big tech from the eventual uh, uh, deplatforming that was looked like it was going to happen during that period where Biden and them was really going heavy with the censorship and the FBI going into YouTube pages and all that. So they wanted to create a safeguard from that. So allegedly, this safeguard was this program that they were going to use that eventually it was going to pump, but they didn't have anybody to really do that because everybody was anti-tech. So here comes JD Vance, and he's doing his thing. So they decided to pump money into him. So him and a bunch of the other so-called conservative tech niggas put bread into this nigga, and then they help him write his first book, the Hillbillyology or some shit, to basically give him the idea of like a hillbilly who's a white Christian nationalist, but he was somewhat integrationist because he grew up on hip hop. Like Boys in the Hood was a heavy movie to him growing up, and this type of shit, right? The Jelly Roll type of black man, the Post Malone prior to him been going country and shit. This type of white dude. So they use that to basically bump up his numbers, and then they were going to try to run him against Trump, and that's when he was anti. But then what started to happen was they see that they started reading the tea leaves that was going to go the opposite way. So let's hook up this dude with Trump and then seal the deal. So then that's when um I forget the three dudes' name. It was these three white Jewish dudes, and they wound up calling Trump right around the time that he was choosing a running mate, and they urged him to get Vance. So they did Vance over Pence because Pence backstabbed him the first time, and then in that they were able to secure a way for them to be able to secure a conservative type of big tech thing. But that has now ballooned into something called Palantir, which is basically like the Minority Report pre-crime want to register American citizenship. So he low key is that. That's why they're really trying to uh, uh, lay the groundwork for him to be the natural successor for Trump in 2028. You know what I mean? So that way he can come in and then he can implement all of that type of shit. You know what I mean? But that's probably not going to happen. So what? So like I said, with the Elon thing, the big bill thing, which was just like the build back better thing that Biden was doing. See the three Bs, both establishments using the same reverse tactics, right? So with this big better build thing they're trying to pass, it's still some bullshit in it because the problem is you have a bunch of people who are in there to try to regulate tech, and then you have a bunch of people who aren't tech that don't necessarily want to explain exactly what their tech is doing because some of them don't even understand the implications of what they're doing with this stuff. So eventually they decide to so these are the people that have to regulate this shit. They don't know what they regulated. They don't know what's in any of this stuff. So eventually, so 1 second. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yeah, I don't know what's up with this junk sometimes. So that's basically what the Palantir and all of this is really about. So that's why everybody's feeling like these niggas is really on some bullshit. So Elon, of course, eventually he want to be able to. Cool. Elon, basically want to be able to stick brain chips in people's heads and all of that in the world that they help create through the false AI shit. So the problem is he didn't have all of the stuff he was preaching against the AI is because he had his own version that he's trying to basically do, you know, because he's a total technocrat. He's a technocratic narcissist. Matter of fact, there's a great movie that you guys should check out called Mountainhead, and it's all about this. You know what I'm saying? It's all about these tech niggas and how they set off revolutions around the world from the comfort of they mountain and they cater lunches, and how they basically do coup d'etats, taking over countries like businesses and all this type of shit. So you should definitely check that out. So yeah, that's what he wants to do, but he wants to do it sooner than drunk and these niggas are trying to do it. So there lies the problem. So I think he just threw that poison pill in there to kind of throw off the whole thing, because they also had the situation they got to move away from the Epstein thing because of the fact that this nigga Cash Patel and these niggas done made themselves look like idiots by saying that he killed himself. Which, you know what I'm saying, give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he did. He did. People don't realize when you read the initial reports of his death, they do say that he tried to commit suicide before. But that could be the alley oop, you know what I'm saying? So that way when they actually did the murder, it could be explained away. You understand? You gotta think like these intelligence people think. And well, you don't want to think like that because they're evil. So you want to be able to apply an objective view on whatever the material is, so that way you don't get caught up in the serialized version of what they're going to present to you as to what happened. So with that being said, the only one on file against and speaking out against this nigga Epstein really was this nigga Trump. So do that, do with that as you may. You know what I mean? It's neither here nor there. Like I said, what we more should understand that we're looking at this from the perspective almost of a neutral observer. That's how we're supposed to be participating in this shit. We're supposed to be participating in it as less as possible in our natural selves. Any version of you that's participating in this has to be a created version for yourself to be able to inject into it the same way um, Neo and them created the avatar for them to exist in the Matrix. That you have to do that. And you do that every day. You do that when you put on a false face for people you don't really like because you want to keep everything cool. If you're the type of person, you got to talk to people every day. You got to, you know what I'm saying? Like you got to create alternative versions of self, because what you're really doing is using the alternative version of yourself that's really like that in whatever reality that you're exhibiting that behavior in, because that's what that moment dictates from you. But that's not necessarily the core you. The core you or I is not even really human like that. You know what I'm saying? Like we get to a point where, as they say, as Randolph said, that as you experience the great good night, and then you getting close to that edge of yourself that is human, you start to realize that there's a part of yourself that never really was a human being, and that type release is what actually brings people into or away from this realm altogether. You understand? It's the final realization that the whole thing was not even necessarily was real, because the experience is what you're carrying. So the experience of the situation was real, but just because you had a real good experience in a video game doesn't mean that you carry that experience of that video game into your real life. You know what I mean? At some point, you turn it off. So at some point, you reach the edge of your so-called human self. And the other side of that is the eternal aspect of you that's connected to source, that, you know what I'm saying, is so abundant that it cannot be confined or labeled as even you. You know what I'm saying? So you go from being a me to a you to a it almost. You understand? So yeah, like Jake, brother Jay said, Palantir sounds like Palatine. Yeah, it sounds like Palatine. It sounds like Palpatine. You know what I'm saying? It's another doomsday Y2K type thing they trying to flip on everybody, flip on us to, you know, keep us in that perpetual state of imprisonment when really that's the state that they're in. We're only visiting this state in this present time due to, again, our illustrious lineage that they have worked so feverishly throughout the millennia to get us to forget. So let's remember. By remembering, we're literally bringing, remembering meaning to remember, to bring back together. You know what I mean? Aspects of the consciousness that you and I had, not only when we was in control, but when we was actually really dominating. You know what I mean? In the recent past, not even in the ancient past, like recently, we was flipping. But because of how words are used, words like free Negroes, freemen, freedmen, which are two different things. A freeman is someone who was born naturally free in a native or national state. A freedman is somebody who was in a natural state but then was altered and put into a circumstance where they had to be freed and then accepted into whatever society that they were nationally or supposed to go into. Understand? So the Freedmen's Bureau, right? And the Freemen's Bureau, see, similar, different, just like Muslim, Muslim, right? Just like more, more. Like these subtle differences are there, but they only get exacerbated by people who want to use those differences to keep us constantly against one another. You know what I'm saying? So, um, what was I gonna say? So these corporations have basically been running amok due to the taking over of the original Moroccan companies, the Anglo-Moroccan um, companies, and the regencies of Algiers and the Sultanate of Ten, T- I always pronounce this wrong. Um, Tina Titlin or Itlin, right? So the main one of the main issues that they have with us is the fact that we have a specific genetic makeup, which makes the plasma in us a certain vibration that, regardless to what they want us to believe, they always want us to say that we descend from somebody else, and we descend from these people across the water and all this other type of stuff, right? Yet these people who they say we descend from don't have this thing, right? So this is what I mean about how they be telling the truth and then they be lying as to why the specific hate comes around. So I asked the devil, which is the GBT, right? I say, yo, is so-called African American blood different than everybody else's, right? And then it said, well, wait, let me pull it up. Okay. I said, do African Americans have the highest percentage of O type blood, right? So then they said, let me show you one. Okay. Sorry about that. Oh my God, what the hell is this? This is crazy. Can y'all hear me? Can you hear me? Y'all can hear me still? I'm sorry. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. The joint keep going up. I don't know what's up. Um. Okay. Cool. So they was telling. So I asked it, yo, do we have a higher concentration of? Figure that out. Um. I'm sorry. This connection thing is bugging me out. So I asked it, yo. So do we have enough O's over here? Like, is it more? Right? And then it was like, nah. And then it was like, nah. But then it showed me this. Okay. Can you hear, right? No, African Americans do not have the highest percentage of O type blood. While African Americans have a high prevalence of O type blood, the highest percentage is found in who? Latino Americans. Generally distributed blood types by ethnicity is 47%. Look up chapter 47 in the Circle 7 Quran. 47% African Americans, 53% Latino Americans. Of that, most of those so called Latinos would be or could be considered so called African American. 39% of Asians and 37% of Caucasians. 24% of African Americans, Latino Americans, 27% of Caucasians, right? Boom. So now I said, well, is there a specific thing in melanated people's blood that is not in everybody else's? So then it says, yes, there are significant differences in blood type distribution among different racial and ethnic groups, including African Americans. Specifically, African Americans have a higher prevalence of O positive blood and unique negative U negative blood types are found exclusively in this population. O positive. African Americans have a higher percentage of O positive blood compared to other groups. But wait, over here, you see how the devil do? Over here, you just said no. They don't have the prevalent, right? The highest percentage. But here, it says that they do. So this is in real time now. I'm showing you. You can listen to this thing, but you also got to take it the same way you take it from anybody telling you anything. You still got to do the knowledge to it because this thing is giving you a fourth dimensional view on it, but it can't necessarily give you perspective on what it is you're doing the knowledge to. You got to know because it really doesn't understand itself as lying until it gets caught lying and then it knows it's a liar. So if it's a liar, right? Would you believe somebody who you heard every day, but you never like physically seen, like had no physical pictures of, no images of? Like, no, you wouldn't, because that's just how things are. So, boom. What does this say? What is this? Then is the African American blood different? Yes. There are notable hematological differences between the blood of African Americans and other ethnic groups, particularly Caucasians. While the basic structure and function of blood remain the same, certain characteristics of the hemoglobin is the goblin, is the hobgoblin, right? In the so-called occultic mystic allegorical metaphorical phrases. That's why the goblin always look crazy. Like a goblin can look like anything because that is the hemoglobin. It's the manifestation of, or supposed to be a physical manifestation of, the hyperplasma that is the etheric element that exists within the so-called melanin. Okay? The hemoglobin levels, the hematocrit, the white blood cell counts can differ. Additionally, some rare blood types are more prevalent in African Americans, making it crucial for them to donate blood. See how they flip it? To donate blood to help individuals with sickle cell disease and other conditions. So right here, they're telling you that your DNA specifically is different than everybody else in the world. You understand? That's what they're telling you. That's not me. So on one hand, they're telling you it's not, but then the other side of it, the other side of the question is that not only is it, but it's specifically yours. Why? Why? So if that's the case, how come we don't find this DNA structure in people from the continent that you're saying that we descend from? How can we descend from somebody genetically that we don't share the direct genetics with? How come it's not in their population? How come we don't see this there? They have a myriad of things in there, but that's cool. But now if I say, oh, well, what if it was that we actually colonized them and we went over there and did all of that in the super ancient times and then left? The majority of us came back, and then the remnants of people that were in all of these places were grew up to establish those cultures that then revered us as their gods and their forefathers, which is why this land was always seen as the holy of holies, right? And the people that was here, us, were the ones who not only had the spiritual advantage, through that spiritual advantage, we were able to amplify that in terms of technology to be able to exacerbate it and create the most wonderful structures in the world, more than anywhere else on the planet. So you believe that, not you, y'all, but they want us to believe that the little island of England went out and just conquered three-fourths of the entire world. That's what we're doing. That's how we're gonna rationalize how we got into this position. And all of those people were white. When all of those people at that time who were white were all so-called slaves. That's what we're saying. Okay. So remember we was talking about the Epstein thing, right? Well, one of the things that came about from all of that was the fact that, or people should know about all of that, is that the whole thing, whenever you see these colors in these places, this is reminiscent to the first harams, right, that were set aside for those newly released prisoners, i.e., Caucasoids and stuff, that was being going to be shipped into the rest of the world. That was in a place called Aleppo, right? And that's where you find the oldest Hebrew Bible, the Aleppo Bible. And there's stuff in there, like I said, that's verified, that goes back to what it is that we're talking about. So the color scheme of that became the way that you would identify these people. You know what I'm saying? Throughout the world, you know, you would keep them refined because this is also reminiscent of the bars that they were locked in, or the walls that they were locked behind. You see what I'm saying? That's why when you see the bars, like it look like the bars that you see on the Stars and Stripes, right? Because that symbol, or those symbol, represented those people who were under those nations, right? That descended from these nations right here that were enslaved, or the ones who were the failed Romans, the failed pagans, right? Who lost all of the wars to Carthage, i.e., the Roman and Moorish Empire and all that, were going to be identified and, let's say, put behind the stripes. That's why when you see certain coats of arms with the stripes on them, these are saying that they were either part of the families that were hosting these prisoners, these slaves, and distributing them, or they had one in their house that was raised up. You see what I'm saying? So they had to let everybody know. So these are the symbols. These are the stripes. Brother Ali Muhammad, big up to him. So Facebook the other day, and he was building on that, and he showed the Kachinas, right? The white and black Kachinas from when we was rounding them niggas up in old Mexico after the fall of Granada. So after the fall of Granada, the so-called Spanish, right, who are the deposed converso Moors, with their Caucasian slaves, right, they start using them as a means to help perpetuate, their state, this new power that they basically lucked into. Because now they're basically walking into stuff that they really had no way of knowing how to use. So they needed as many converso Moors, dirty Moors, to help them maintain that. So that's what they did. And in that, they were able to get new titles and they were able to then help with the plundering of what was happening with the rest of the society and the people, that wasn't with that. So they basically started to be referred to as Spanish instead of Moorish, almost like a slur. 'Cause remember, there was no Spain in 1492. That was Castile and Aragon. So how it go from Castile and Aragon to Spain? Anybody ever asked they something? Because it was two families that bought property and then used the property as a means to extend their their boundary line beyond where it was supposed to go. You understand? And so when we would go to war with these things, when we would let them out the caves or when they would be started to be refined and stuff, that's when they would start taking them to the bathhouses, and that's when you see the white women being separated from the so-called white men, right? This is all in what they call the Christian slave narratives. You can read all about this stuff. And this is the orderly society, or what you call the real slave trade, is how it was administered to everybody during these periods. So these places that you see like this, these became the colors that would everybody knew, oh, this is where you go to buy them, this is where you go to trade them, this is where you go to sell them. Understand? Easy. And then, like I said, people in those colors usually were people, like I said, who were basically slaves or were put into some sort of harsh indentured servitude. You know what I'm saying? So that became the way that these niggas, started to create the business of selling these people and getting the diseases, separating the ones with diseases, because the males were the ones that were carrying the diseases. So they naturally had to be separated from the females, right? During this process. So I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying that this was the process by which Morse was getting it and was putting this shit into proper usage. And these places, right? What happened from there was after a certain point when they couldn't be, or if they wasn't going to be sold, they got the thing and they got to be there too long. Then the only way to thing was to either put them to work, right, or marry them off to one of the up and coming Mameluke families or whoever else is now under the patronage of whatever more is allowing them to move up. You understand? So again, you could read about this in the book Candide by Voltaire. You could read about it in Merchant of Venice. This is big business. You understand? Because after a certain point, the Europeans, like I said, when they started poisoning them, putting vril worms and shit in them to to turn these Moors out and make them go crazy, that also created the indemnity in the bloodline, right? Because these Moors is watching them give up their whole life, like with this addiction. You understand? Not knowing that this is witchcraft and shit being flipped on them via sex. You understand? Same way they doing now, right? And so they would throw the parties and you would go there, whatever, and then you would go to these places, right? That were depicted like this, and then you would pick whichever one out, and then, you travel across, sell them, have sex with them, have babies with them, whatever it is you're going to do. And then because of the system, those children weren't necessarily subjected to slavery because they had a noble parent, right? They just couldn't receive the greater education from the greater Moorish Empire because now they were confined due to the lineage. See what I'm saying? You had to be full noble to be able to go and be a part of certain things and will make certain moves and shit. So these niggas started resenting that, started resenting their mothers, you see what I'm saying? Or worse, start resenting their fathers and then starting to buy their own white chicks, right? And then try to play and put all of that envy, hatred, guilt into them, have these converso babies. Now you got a whole generation of these kids that speaking Arabic, speaking Latin, wearing turbans and all of that. But these niggas is blonde hair, blue eyes, and they talking about where's our inheritance? Like what? Then the rest of the Moors in the other territories looking at like, oh, y'all niggas crazy. We shutting all of this down. And that's what started to happen globally. You know what I mean? And it went on. It was a long-term strategy to preserve whatever was left. That's why by 1492, it was like, oh, y'all just want to buy a little Granada? Oh, that's nothing. We still going, you know what I'm saying? So from 1492 to like 1550, maybe they was kind of making some noise. But then after that, it was downhill because once Al Mansour became Sultan of America, that was it. Everybody got shut down. Everybody was getting shut down. Everybody was paying money. This is what it is. Because the money went for the global defense, right? And all of the different types of taxes and stuff that was coming from the thing was going to directly to the coffers of the administration, sultanate or the khanate or the imamate or the caliphate, right? And so it was harsh penalties because everybody was basically living good. The only people that wasn't was the people who felt that they deserved more, which was usually those dispossessed lords that had all of their stuff taken before the around the time of the fall of the so-called the First Temple. So we started locking all of them up. We started really imposing the jizzle on these people. And, a lot of people took offense to it and acted like it wasn't something that we should be doing. But it's like, who else gonna do it? Because when it was the Romans and these niggas that's doing it, they was forcing y'all into their religions and all of that. The Moors was not forcing people into being Moors. People were coming all over the world to be like and learn from the Moors. So they wasn't going. What was they trying to be like they self? They already was they self. Everybody trying to be like them. That's why I have so many subgroups and subcategories of these Moors. Right? You had the Mudehans, you had the Moriscos, you had the Moros, right? These are all just derivative types of Moors that was from different parts, but they wasn't from the main line. But they had their own version of the culture that they kept because of our ancient traditional relationship. So when you see this flag, this is your flag. What they did was they took your flag is the one with the cannons in the middle. That's how you always know is yours. They took the cannons out and put the star in it. So when you see the white boys is the ones with the star in the middle. Yours is the ones with the cannons because we was the ones with the heavy mechanized technology. You understand? Because we had kept it over from the old world. Like I said, this right here, this is in Brooklyn. This is in Brooklyn. I think right over there, over on Bushwick or something. You understand what I'm saying? So we are the ones that were really running this thing and still are, albeit asleep at the wheel. You know what I mean? So we started to put a heavy restriction on the movement of these people and making sure that they couldn't go from place to place, especially when we started getting the stories and hearing these niggas just out here bugging, locking people up and all of that. So we started to really go crazy. So when you see stuff like this is what that was about. So when they talk about the Dinka and the Mali and the so-called West Africans, they're talking about the Moors. That's who they're talking about. That's who those people are. The West Africans, the Cameroonians, them niggas is more related to us than people in eastern portions of Africa. right? Or even Central Africa. They were all related to us because they were a part of our excursions over there cleaning up shit. Like I said, we went over there and had to re-establish Songhai because they had ran the shit into the ground. Because the niggas was out there. It's a time we got cannons, we got muskets, we got damn near flying machines. These niggas is out here trying to hold everything down, protect the the border lines of the empire with sticks and spears and shit. Like what century y'all niggas in, man? You know? And so that's why we were always seen as the liberators of everywhere we went, because we are. Look at what we did in World War II, World War One and World War II. We shut it all down. Why? Because we, the ones who are the Moors, the Canaanites, who were the most depraved and the most messed up, right? Who allegedly were the sons of Cain, right? Who waging wars against our so-called Israelite brethren, even though the story says they came into our land, took over our shit because their God told them it was okay to basically commit genocide, which is the justification of why they're doing all the stuff they doing there. And they not even the real people. They say, oh, you took my land 3,000 years ago. What? Y'all niggas, this place wasn't established until 1948. What y'all niggas doing? But whatever. So we started doing that. So the Dinka, the Bambara, the Hausa, all of these West African Cameroonians. Well, that's why you think Liberia. Why you think we was able to go over there and set Liberia up so sweet until the niggas came and corrupted and destroyed that? Because that's how it always was. We named the continent Africa. We did. Not Leo Africanus. You really think Caesar, as egomaniacal as they tell you Caesar was, you think Caesar would allow one of his own generals to have a continent named after him? Think about all of the shit you done heard about Caesar. You think somebody like that would let an underling have a continent named after him? This how I know these African American niggas be crazy with the fake history shit. How about now? Y'all hear me now? What is up tonight with it? But I hope you can hear it. How's it now? Feel better? Can you hear me better? All right. So it wasn't until Ruth, right? Ruth is the linchpin. She's the connection between Zadok, who is John the Baptist, who is king of Lydia, and his wife Lydia, which you get the name Lydia from, who was one of the first kingdoms at that time to mint gold coins and stuff. She from that line. She came in and redeemed basically all of us. Same way you say Christ would, based on her actions and all of that. And in that, the covenant was then now extended or reestablished with us. You understand? This is before Yeshua in their story. And from that point on, those Moabites kept their covenants with everybody that was down with it. Unlike the Israelites, that every time they lost their power, prayed to get it back, got it back, then started worshiping other gods, and the cycle, rinse, repeat. This became a thing. The Hatti lorded over other peoples who lived in Asia Minor. They were inventors of the double-headed eagle, which always has been a symbol of the German Empire, right? The double-headed eagle of the Hittites. Hastig says that the northern Hittites, see, the Chatti or the Aiti, right, or the Aiti, right, seem to have had special fancy for combining parts of different animals into strangely composite, sometimes grotesque forms. He goes on to say that they were responsible for bringing the double-headed eagle into Europe, and they even found in Turkey, which again is what? North Carolina, where the ancient Hittites lived. The same symbol found in
leave it.
The same symbol found in the kingdom of Prussia. The Eastern European nations have the double-headed eagle as well. See below. The Abraham's descendants joined with the Assyrians, as it is only likely that since they joined the Assyrian community, that they incorporated their symbols as well. The Chati are known to carry standards, as were seen in many Nazi parades. The swastika, another ritual standard of the ancient Chati. Right? Now remember, white folk, the word ancient and white folk don't go together because they were not ancient anywhere. They just basically got here. And this is not to diss them because they had to create a history for themselves by deducting and putting their faces on aspects of yours. But let's call it what it is. It's not what it is. So the Arian or the Arianus Afris Empire that the Romans referred to the Moorish Empire as were again connected to the ancient Moabites or the Hatti or the Shati or the Haiti, right? Same people, same lineage from over here. But because again they remained and renamed everything over there something else after something here, gave us a history, and then that's what it is, but it's not. So we find the double-headed eagle not only in Germany, right? But we find it also in so-called Mesoamerica, or what the article referred to as, excuse me, okay, right? So German, Aryan, that's all Moorish. That's that's all melanated people, melanated, technologically advanced people. You know what I'm saying? It has nothing to do with all this other type of shit they talking to us about. So let me show you how we did it. So these Chati or Hatti people are also the remnants of the Phoenician people, who are also remnants of, or who became the Carthaginian people, who, for lack of a better word, we can also refer to as the old Algonquin peoples, because they were the ones who set out to recolonize and reestablish the world after the great cataclysms. One of these organizations, global organizations that we, again, Moorish people had or have, was or is the, hold on, I'm sorry. Okay. We had something referred to as the Hanseatic League. Anybody ever heard of this? Or the Hanseatic Legions. The Hansi is actually Hansa because they were connected to all of the towns that was situated in elements of Western Asia, aka Europa, that still had direct family lines and ties to us over here, and therefore could do trade under the war banners, the stripes, see, of whatever nation over here that was hosting them to come over there and do business. Come over here and do business. Okay? Okay. The Hanseatic League was a powerful medieval network of trade guilds and towns in the northern and central Europe, right? But we know this is Europa, so this is all of Asia. Centered around the Baltic and the northern seas. Formed in the 12th century and officially established in 1356, it aimed to protect mutual interests to facilitate trade. The League's influence peaked in the 14th century, but eventually declined due to various factors and the rise of nation states and shifting trade patterns. The Hanseatic League's origins can be traced to the 12th century. The term Hansa came from the Old High German word for crowd, reflecting the League's origins in the collective merchant effort. the trade monopoly. Hanseatic League aimed to establish, maintain trade monopoly over the Baltic Sea and parts of Northern Europe. So these were the trade families that was around that. So when they talk about the Dutch and the Swedes and the Hessians and all of these people, they were all connected via the Hatti bloodline, right? Taking them back to the Moabites. Because even when you go back to, everybody talk Egypt, 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 but who did the Egyptians get all this stuff from? They're going to say, oh, the Anunnaki. No, they didn't. And Anunnaki responsible for everything now. No, they didn't get it from them. They got it from the so-called Chaldeans, or what some people refer to as the Chaldeans. These Chaldeans were the ones who gave them the mysticism, because that's where Abraham or Abram came from. He turned his name to Abraham to sound more dank because he came by way of Egypt. That's why he had money, because the Egyptians used to pay the Chaldean priests to come in there and teach them what all that shit meant. They didn't know none of that. A lot of that stuff they was doing all the way up until the time of Mark Antony and shit was just shit they was doing to sell to Greeks, to get Greek money, because they know the Greeks were stupid and they would just believe whatever Egyptian niggas told them to do. Understand? So everybody, what is going on with this shit, bro? Y'all hear me still? Somebody type it in, let me know. At this point, I don't even know. Okay, cool. Okay. What part did I stop? What part did it stop? I'm sorry. You know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. How about now? Everybody good? What about now? Yes? Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know, man. So yeah, we just left off where I was just saying the Greeks were stupid. So the Egyptians was just teaching them basically anything at a certain point because they didn't really even know. The only people that know were the high priest of Anu, the people who kept it going, and the people who took it back to the original source. Those again, i.e., were the Moors. Don't believe me? Read The Destruction of Western Civilization by Chancellor Williams. He say it in there. Shank Ain't the Diop says it in there. He said that all of them, the real ones, left and went to West Africa. And then from West Africa, they crossed the shores back over here. That's why everybody always come here. Because we are where it's popping. And they descend from us. But we had to make delineations to make sure that these people would know that if they tried to do whatever, they could get shipped to one of the jails, you know what I mean, or one of the way stations. So that's how the white folks would always wind up in them places and they would be put in them suits that you see. Case in point. So whenever you see that, you got to remember these stripes. That's why I don't really wear stripes or checkers. You know what I'm saying? Well, no, that's not true. I got a polo joint, an old school polo hoodie that's white and blue like that. But outside of that, I try not to wear like stripes and shit like that, especially these, because it's somewhat symbolic. You know what I'm saying? You see what I mean? See what I mean? Like that's how they would mark that's how we would mark prisoners. You know what I'm saying? From ancient times, we was doing this. Look at these prisoners. Like I said, big up to brother Ali Muhammad. He showed this the other day, and I was like, yeah, I've been noticing that. And then looked into it, and then found the Aleppo shit. Was like, oh, okay, so this was the system that we was using to put them in. And then anybody that wound up in that system wound up having to be depicted as that. You understand? So it got to a point, like I said, we was just imprisoning all these niggas. And then that became a thing. We just passed that down. This thing just keep going in. Can y'all hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. So that's what I gotta do. I just gotta keep checking it. Okay. So yeah, so they did that. So we just kept that system going. You know what I mean? And just never really altered it. And then what wound up happening is we wind up falling victim by people within our immediate surroundings that wind up getting us caught up into that. That's what the whole craze of kidnapping Moors and putting them into indentured servitude and shit started to become about. But it became a problem, like I said, because it was so many Moors doing it and there was so much amalgamation going on. You didn't know who was who. Niggas was just passing. So they literally started to, you know what I mean, started to bring the hammer down. Because these were also the people plotting against the Republic, plotting against the Empire, plotting against whatever Moorish state they was in. You understand? So, restrictions should have to be made. Especially now that you had the decoys coming up and trying to now impose laws against the darker skinned slaves, so-called indentures, against the perpetual slaves, and then started to blur the line with that. You can read more about that in the book Forgotten Cause of the Civil War. So like you see here, the Kachina dolls, they was making dolls for little kids to know, like, oh, this is evil, this is what the evil people look like when you see them dressed in these stripes. You know what I'm saying? So like I said, the stripes became the symbol of people who were under restriction. So once the imperial forces, monarchy and stuff started to fall over here, they had to make the union. See, where they had enough of the indentured servant so-called blacks and then their so-called whites under them that are now petitioning for their freedom and are willing to fight the despotic aspect of the Moorish Empire. That's basically, like I said, basically keeping everybody in a worldwide prison because everybody was tripping after a while. You know what I'm saying? And then that became the thing, control. And so we reorganized the empire. So from, like I said, Al-Mansur comes in. He reorganizes the empire. Helps reestablish now, refortify the Regency of Algiers. That's all of the Maghreb and what they call an Old France, right? Which again is all the Doug the Mountie of Louisiana, all of that. IET, right? Elements of the Caribbean, and they just start a heavy militaristic purge. We sent man forces over to Europa. That's how the Turks was ruling all of Europe and basically Asia up until the 1900s, right? Who do you think that was? You know what I mean? But we just see these white cereals of these old white Turks that just got imported in there after all of the Circassian slaves was free. And they put feathers on their heads and had them march and, you know what I'm saying? Put them in the ISIS theaters, had them watch the movies, tooled them up, right? Meanwhile, the so-called Afro-Asiatic peoples, they they there. They now called Afro-Turks. But they're the original Turk. They're the original ones because they're the ones connected to us over here. That's why everybody that look like us, wherever they at, we're all over the world, is going through the same type of shit we going through. So, like I said, what started to happen, you started to create generations of this interpersonal relationship with these so-called Slavs, right? And their white counterparts who are working with them to help maintain this new United States Union that they have been into with them ever since. These are the niggas that when they say, "Well, who's the son?" These are the ones who descended from the ones who descended from the ones who descended from the ones. These are the ones who decided we're not going to be Tasalagi, we're going to be Cherokee, and we're going to go with the U.S. designation of what this is now because we got to modernize what we do. Because we got to get away from the agricultural resource of using all of these white slaves as free labor, right? We need to liberate them, right? They need to fight in our cause. And so they started to take all of these Africans that we had shut down from coming over here as Christian mercenaries on behalf of the Portuguese. Exactly, on behalf of the Portuguese and the rest of them. Because these were Christian mercenaries, these Africans that came with them. And they came over here to kill niggas. They used to have these war dogs that they would train to just run in certain areas when they knew we was away fighting and just eat the women and the children. And they would put armor and shit on them. Like they was crazy. But they was all crazy Christians, right? But they were Portuguese, but they was Congolese too. And so we shut them down, beat them down, killed them, rounded up the men, separated the women, just like we did to the white Slavs. And then we put them on plantations. We forbid them to read. We forbid them to know what their ancient culture was because they forfeited all of that when it came over. And then generation wise, they just kept their Christianity going. And then you and I believe that that is the original culture that these so-called slaves have brought with them over from Africa. No, those slaves that came over here on them boats with that, they were a lot of them Portuguese mercenaries, right, who were working with Portugal to come over here and help dethrone us. And then when we shut them down, they became the first blacks to go on the plantations. You understand? And then they were perpetually kept miseducated or uneducated, right? While the whites who had been captured then were put to be the overseers over them. You see? So these niggas right here are the descendants of these niggas. That's why they're here positioned Look, all the white men standing. The two black men that are standing, they got their hands folded, left over right. Look at him. Whenever you see them sitting like this with that, they showing their socks. That's the ritual. That's like saying my skirt is up, right? Under that and getting told what to do by the two white men, right? It's A. Philip Randolph, one of the biggest boule Luciferian niggas, sellout niggas. Roosevelt's Black Cabinet in 1938 photograph. Look at these sellouts. Sleep. These is black people. You think these are white people? These is black, so-called melanated people. This is what black people used to look like. These niggas passing. These are the guys who urged other people to keep segregation and shit like that going, so that way the NAACP and these people could perpetuate this fake history of us being at the beck and call of other nations. They the ones doing that. The so-called black upwardly mobile people. These are the niggas that'll tell you that Madam C.J. Walker was the first so-called black billionaire. But I showed you Sarah Bachter in the mid 1800s, and she was a multi-millionaire at 12 because of the oil wells that them Moors had out there. So which one is it, niggas? Which lie is it? But they'd rather you know about Madam C.J. Walker, because then that lets you become a hair weave bundle queen. You know what I mean? Instead of getting into black oil barons. You understand? These are them. These are the ones who pledged. So all the Divine Nine societies, each one of those societies protects one of the royal families, one of the so-called bloodline papal families. So the Roosevelts are protected by the Washingtons, but the Washingtons and the Roosevelts are basically the same people. Remember, Booker T. Washington was playing two different people. He was playing Booker T. Washington, the character, the nigga who got all of the press from the so-called Jewish media that was out there telling them this. And then on the other side, in the Republic side, he's also Teddy Roosevelt playing the game with the decoy, Teddy Roosevelt, who was a white so-called Indian killer, because he was part of the Rough Riders, which was basically a Janissary corps that was used to round up the last of the wild Siberian renegade Indians. Because the Moors, they were fighting the Spanish-American War and everything else to maintain what was left of the country under the guise of the so-called merchant marines. The real army, the grand army of the Republic. So here he is with Carnegie. See, with Carnegie? Say these are the niggas that set up Jacob Astor and all of those rich, noble Moorish families that was on the Titanic to get killed. These are this. So you say the Boule, you're not just talking about the so-called blacks. You're talking about the blacks and the whites that they integrated with. All of these people that you see here is melanated, including Carnegie. Look, it's Carnegie's grandson. Look at this thing. How many melanated people you done seen with skin like that? He looked like a young little Malcolm X. Look, he not even looking. He not even looking at the camera because they know. This the day they went to do the rituals, right? And this is how you got the three-headed beast. What's his name? Washington, who was Roosevelt, Carnegie, and Mellon. See the cross? Right? So these is all of the main ones, basically. And they were the ones who, and Carter G. Woodson. Carter G. Woodson, W.B. Du Bois, what's his name? W. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson, A. Philip Randolph, Durham, all of these dudes, B, all of them. And this is not to say that the average so-called Mason is out there buck dancing and doing the stuff that they be doing, right? This is not to say that they are necessarily a part of this. They don't know no better. They all these things want to do is wear costumes and shit or whatever. They're not really in the know of it. But what you have to understand is that these organizations eternally or anciently or predominantly have always been used to usurp the natural progression of the society, to move it towards what these sick Luciferian bastards wanted to be. And they've been doing this shit ever since we shut them down when they was calling themselves Harishef. And they've been trying to resurface and do the shit ever since. See, they go Thurgood Marshall, right? Then here he go with the decoy. Here go the real and the decoy together. Here go the real and the decoy together. But look, that's the national flag. See the national flag of the country? Under the bars, because this is the representation of the union. How they working together. This is Stephen and Carl Candy. That is the relation. Master minor and minor major and major minor. Always working in tandem. So they are the one. That's why the NAACP, all of that was set up by the same people, funded by the same people. And then whenever there was a real movement that came and the people was responding to it and they was ready to go in with it, they sent in people to come usurp the movement, flip it, turn it into what they could use it for. They had all of these fake movements to get away from what the prophet was doing, to get away from what Garvey was doing. These were not movements to reunify the people and put them back on the land. These were movements to further put people in a stateless position. One of those movements was called the Niagara movement, named for Niagara Falls, because that's where they would all go up there and do the sex rituals at. You understand? They would do these rituals, these sex rituals, these all of this type of shit, so that way they could all keep the thing going, because they were all patterning themselves after the white Greek Circassian gods. Because when these Circassian slaves was locked up in them striped Aleppo temples and stuff and put in the dungeons and shit, a lot of these niggas came from pagan beginnings. So they was praying to Diana. They was praying to Athena. They was praying to all of these dead world deities. You know what I'm saying? That the Moors by this time allowed people to believe in, but it wasn't to the point where they was going to allow them to establish that over the true and living God. So once these people start to integrate with other so-called pagan black people, they just basically adopt the same shit, just practice how they do it. And then they work together to get rid of the rest of us. The Niagara Movement, a predecessor of the NAACP, was a civil rights organization founded in when? 1905. W.E.B. Du Bois and others to fight for full rights of African Americans. The movement's core goal was to challenge racial discrimination and segregation, demanding equal rights for black citizens, including the right to vote. But remember, we've already had the right to vote under the preamble to the 7th article, as well as the fact you had the nationality, because by 1920 something, Noble Jew Ali and them had got Oscar the Priest elected to the Senate, either Congress or the Senate, at a time when they say that people wasn't voting. So who didn't have the right to vote? Who didn't have the right to elect who they wanted? Who didn't have their own communities and stuff? Everybody that was descended from these people who they could trace back to the people that helped them. That's why when the North finally invaded the South, they wanted to free all of the slaves. The slaves they was freeing was the white people. They was freeing them and the indentured Africans that had, by third generation, had been basically Americanized, but deeply Christianized. See what I'm saying? But now they done adopted the same way, because prior to them, the generations before that came over, them Congolese mercenaries, they was all Portuguese Christians. You dig? So again, this is not to impugn the whole orders and all of that, but it is to say whenever there's some effery going around, these niggas is always involved. That ain't me. That ain't me making this up. This is something that you can always see, because they always need their actors in place to make it happen. So no, you may not be a bad cop, but you are part of an organization that is founded on something bad. So inadvertently, you benefit and you don't from that relationship. So you don't get it to go. You can't get it both ways, bro. And these niggas have the network. This is the network that Puffy and them is dealing with. Remember I told you? Remember when what's his name and them was coming up deep? Well, before I get into that, these are the guys that perpetuate or help them perpetuate the illusion. Not because I say so, because this is what it is. This is what they doing. This is what they doing, man. How come everybody that's involved or anything dealing with Black Death or some sort of Black police murder, how come somebody in their family is always involved in the craft? What's up with that? It cannot be a coincidence if it's a pattern. You understand? It can't be a coincidence if it's a pattern. And these niggas keep coming up in everything that's dealing with something messed up. Trayvon Martin's father. On your left is Castile, is Philando Castile's uncle. It's like people pick and choose when they could flip the ritual shit. Oh, that was a ritual, but this ain't. Like they all rituals to these people. You understand? Like they're all a part of it. They all look. If you wear the colors of the gang, that means what? If you wear the colors of the gang, what does that mean, y'all? Don't they have whole videos on this in YouTube? Right, you banging. Right, you're a part of the gang. So Mother Teresa, for instance, was a part of the gang. You understand? How many children this demon trafficked around the world to those sick ass Catholic monarchs, aka priests, for rituals? And remember, all of this stuff that we're seeing with this Catholic Church and all of that stuff is all Persian shit. At the very top of it all, this is a bunch of crypto Persians. The Persians were, I told y'all, the Persians were the ones who took everybody's religion after the fall, right? These Persian Moors, these Babylonian Moors, right? Because they was melanated. They don't get a pass because they was, you know what I mean? They was melanated, but they was. And they were the ones that got together and was like, nah, we're going to rebuild everybody in the world's temples. And then when we do that, we can't do it, but we got the money. So what we're going to do, we're going to pay the Egyptians to build all of the stuff from us. And in the course of them doing that, they were able to go into everybody's religion and tool it and tweak it and just what they could do. And then systematically, after the fall of Persia, right? Because towards the end, Persia and Rome basically joined forces. That's the only way they could stop the Moors, the Moorish advance, by submitting and marrying into Attila's and them family. It's the only way they could do it. So the Persian god was Zoroaster. The goal was to put Zoroaster over everybody. You understand? So at the root of a lot of these conflicts and shit that's going on, all of these pagan deity niggas or whatever, they're all serving all of these different gods, right? While trying to work together, right? To suppress the true and living. See what I'm saying? So they take the natural expression of humankind to give alms and honor to elements of the reality that's higher than itself, all to then spit on it and then try to set themselves up as God in the meantime. Right? Yeah, and they brought thank you. And they brought all of that shit in. They brought all of it into the modern time. So yeah, so she was down with it. So that's what so everybody you see with it, this is what I'm saying. They down with it. Because they wearing the colors of the people that's down with it. And these black boulets, these whether they be African Christians, right? The messianic evangelist ones, the ones that was trying to chase the original more from over here. And again, an American over there trying to bring them the truth, tell them to stop worshiping, idol worshiping the white devil, the white Jesus God or whatever, right? Um, and they don't want to do it. They chased him out. They threatened to kill him because they love that European more than they love themselves or us. That's why what's happening in Burkina Faso and those places should be commended because that brother is literally working, trying to work a miracle. He's trying to get these people to go back to their own culture in the modern times. That's why he said, no, burner baby, you're not coming over here with your weed and all your other shit that you want to do to help corrupt these people. No, we got enough problems. The CIA ain't going to use you to come over here and try to poison me by putting some poison on your hand when you shake my hand. You know how they do. You know how they do. So yeah, so here he is again, the devil. That's why Booker T. Washington is the god of all this shit. Him, Carver. Think about what they did to Carver. As great and everything is him. Allegedly, they castrated him. That's why his voice was so high. And he was so embarrassed of it, he would rather people think he was gay than for them to know that his best friend's family, Henry Ford, these white devils that's passing, done castrated him because they didn't want him to have anything to do with their daughter. You say, well, how could the people do that? Because these people was just made in an hour. They made these niggas in like an hour. Incubated these niggas out of bogs, out of cabbage patches. Like, you understand? These things was homunculuses. They was using old world necromantic type magic to help infest and bring these things into existence, man. That's why they didn't have no empathy. That's why whatever you showed them in them ISIS theaters for them to get it on and for them to figure it out, they just, okay, this is the reality now. This is us. Go look at The Godfather. Go look at Gangs in New York. These niggas was living in squalor. Tammany Hall was ruling over them niggas and not giving them nothing. To the point they had to create their own gangs based on the old shit the old beefs that they was having when they was peasants in the lands that they got enslaved on, and then brought all that shit here. So, like I said, we just mechanized the war against them. We shut all of that shit down. Anybody that was employing them, anybody that was trying to bring them amongst the rest of the population, we wasn't having it after a certain point. That's why people was bugging. Like people wouldn't even see them. Sometimes there was hundreds of years. These people was out here. People never even seen white people. That's why they was bugging when they finally came into view. Like they was like, oh, this is what, you understand? So the Ottomanis, the Ottomanguan, the Ottoman, the Osmanali, the Tuscarora, the Mystic Turks, the Turks, we got busy and put everybody back in power. But I feel like because Grenada was lost, that's really was the heart. That's where everybody got together. That was like the ancestral, all right, we get back together thing happened. That was gone now. So now it just went back to everybody's royal house and how we was going to deal with each other as uncles and cousins and shit. But the ancestral ties between the ancient Germans, the ancient Canaan, all of that goes by way of this Moabite, Canaanite, Hittite, Amorite, Amalekite, um, so-called Israelite connection that we share. However, like I said, because of Ruth, that's why when the Israelite niggas want to come and try to diss you, say, "Oh, well, the Moors can't be this," and no, we're the heads of your shit. We're the heads of all of that because we were the ones who initially begat the bloodline, right? But then came out of it and was so not with y'all niggas that they or we started inbreeding with each other. Didn't they tell you that the ancient royal class started having things with their own relatives after a certain point to keep the blood blue, to keep the copper content higher in line? But the more physical they begot with that, the more uh, the spirituality of the practice became nullified, right? Or what the true, whatever they thought the real purpose was, to preserve something, was now getting diluted. And now they started to practice or started to receive the penalty for that. And so they started to be shunned from everybody else. They got brought down, right? It caused an enmity in their family. It caused them to not be able to really unite with one another. Who that sound like? Who that sound like? Did you just see a video the other day of Kevin Gates? They was talking about how Draco was his cousin and he married her. What you think? This shit just come out of nowhere? No. But they had to breathe that out. And the way to do that was to accept the spirituality, which then allowed you to raise up in your own nationality because now you want one to reflect the other. And so, like I said, by the time the story comes with Ruth and through her sacrifice comes into that, then we all came in behind that. Because if it was no Ruth, there'd be no Yeshua, right? Exactly. So that's how everything started to, like I said, get corrupted, and then we started to separate ourselves even more, and then got more back into the sciences. So back by the time that the temple fell, and we started to initiate, now, okay, we're gonna remake the world the way that this nigga said he wanted to be done. And we did. We did. Where you couldn't tell the Christian, the Muslim, and the Jew or whoever apart. Everybody was getting money. Everybody was paid. Everybody was speaking in similar languages. This was rocking for millennia. We don't know how long it was, but we know it was way good before it was way bad. And then when we fell, that's when the entire world started to fall. Right behind us. So when we talk about the Regency of Algiers, big up to brother Shikamagi, he talked about that too. And basically was set up by Frederick first of Germany, right? From over here, went over there, married into the Holy Roman Empire, became King Barbarossa, right? The Holy Roman Empire. Then his great great grandsons, the Barbarossa twins, they wound up helping set up the Regency of Algiers, putting the Haiti Empire back in play. So before we go out, here is the real Marcus Aurelius, and then here's the fake one they created in the 20th century to fool you. And then these are the people doing it. Big up to Johnny Aborigine. This is a old joint that he put up talking about these demons. Yeah, so Marcus Aurelius on the one joint I had said was Marcus Aurelius. Another joint I had said was Hannibal, but I think it's more Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus Aurelius is the real one on the left, the fake one is on the right, and then on the in the middle, and then on the left are the fathers of African history. These are the niggas that created so-called African history, in line with Ida B. Wells and all the rest of those guys who helped shape our modern view of what black people are: helpless captives, perpetually ignorant slaves who need white people to coddle them and always need to be reminded of what they've overcome to be something now. Okay? So, yeah, so a lot of the so called Freemasonic rites that you see go through, all of that was filtered through the Talmudic Jews, right? Not even the black ones, the so called white ones. And they are the ones who influenced all of the modern that, because Albert Pike was a Ashkenazi Jew, if you didn't know. And he also was a homosexual. He also was the one who wrote all of their rights. So they can't say they're against white supremacy, but then you are following the rights created by the ultimate so-called Luciferian homosexual white supremacist, who's also a wizard. They say he was the great great grandfather of Crowley, because all these demons are related. So that's Marcus Aurelius. So you could dead him being white. So if Marcus Aurelius wasn't white, none of them niggas was white. Understand? That's how I go. This is an old picture of King, I think it's Ethelbert. Uh, yeah, so the original is in the middle. The copy is on the left. Here we go. And like I said, all of these kings, all of these kings and queens and crowns and stuff were all ethereal, energetic weapons that we was using to knock these dudes out. Yeah, here we go. And then on your right is a image of one of the earliest engravings of King George, excuse me, Saint George slaying the dragon. It's one of the oldest images of him doing this. Okay, all right. See what I mean? So there's George. See all the Moors in the castle? You don't see no white people in there, do you? See the UFO over the door? Mm-hmm. Then look at the other Moor right here. It's the princess, I think. I think that's a female. And he's protecting her. See the crystal castle? The back? He was balling out of control, bro. So that's the thing. And then these are the two. This is the fake. So this the real one here. And then this one is the fake one. So when they say, so when I was coming up, they was like, all these pictures that you see of Saint Maurice is of the same picture. It's the same dude. Like, what? So all of these pictures of all of these different knights, you mean to tell me they all of the same dude? Like, yo, they'll just say anything, bro. Just keep you just out there, lost in Asia. So that's the problem with the Moorish thing, because what the Moorish thing is really doing is, and I just showed you that your bloodline, especially if you so-called African American, i.e. Moorish American, born here on the land. That's why when these niggas be talking about, oh well, Moorish American is not a, it's not a nationality. You're not going to be able to notice that anywhere in the world. That's not true, because I traveled around different places. One of those places being Barbados, and they gave me the sheet. to fill out where you from or whatever, what your nationality is. I wrote Moorish American right there. Looked right at the dude. He looked right at it. Looked at me. Said, no doubt. Welcome to the country, sir. He ain't say, well, you can't write that. Like these niggas say anything. Like half the people talking this stuff about this stuff, they don't even have passports. They've never even left the country to know what work, what don't, what they say. That's not the point. The point is you are what you say you are, and when you know that you from here and they see you like that, they know you part of the royal class. Sorry, that's what the Moorish thing does. Put you in the noble royal class of humanity. Because we are the ones who have gone down on record generationally through all epochs of time, fighting to restore the integrity of the one God, which is the highest aspect of self, the i.e. source, that they say a lot of the non-believers and heathens say don't exist. Well, it don't. Then when you ask them, well, what does exist? Nothing. So nothing then becomes your God, which because not nothing is something. Even in math, the space between the integers has to be counted. So the nothing that you say you believe in is your God. See what I'm saying? Once you know, you cease to believe. But until you know, your belief is your protection. You see? That's why when that belief is taken for granted or betrayed, that's why it hurts so much. Because believing is part of knowing. You cannot know and not believe. But once you know, you cease to believe. Why? Because you know. Here's another one. This is Constantine and his mother, the original, and then next to that is the fake. Sorry, I guess I don't have that one. Oh, no. Oh, wait. Here's this one. This is a bad one. This is from Brazil, from the royalty in Brazil. The real version and then the fake version. So remember what I was telling you about the Africans that was being put up because of their relationship through the renegade Christian Portuguese. You ask, well, how could these black people allow these other black people to get abused and put into slavery and killed and stuff? Same way you could walk down the street and see a person. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Same way you could get accosted by the police and see somebody get beat down and all that today and not jump in and do nothing because you don't know the circumstances. Also, we wasn't color struck back then. We wasn't color struck as much back then as we are now. Same way you have vagrants and all that stuff you got today, you had that back then. It's just that a lot of these people were, like I said, stateless and trying to live off the imperial dollar, imperial monarchy, and we wasn't having it. So we reorganized everything and went out and shut it down. So you see how they got how light they made everybody? See? But in the original, she was dark. See in the back, they got the white slave beating the black African slave. See? It's what they doing, man. We get it twisted. So yeah, so that's why we militarized everything up and we just held everything down for so long. But like I said, the fault lies in after 1812, everything started going downhill, not only through the upheavals, the world upheavals, but the fact that we have fallen. And now the custodial ships started coming through and the reconstruction shit and all the sellout niggas started to reorganize themselves under this new United States, which was the three-state Hydra: Downing Street, Vatican, and Washington, D.C. One of the last forts that we had was a place they referred to as Fort Negro. And the captains and them said that by the time they finally was able to get into Fort Negro, when they came in, they saw two flags flying. They saw the British Union Jack and the red Moorish flag flying here in Florida together. That was so-called Fort Negro. But it was actually called the Moorish Fort or Fort Moore. And it wasn't a patch of dirt. Like they got you thinking, they got us thinking like them. Like when we was fighting in forts, we think like westerns and shit. You know what I'm saying? But these forts we was fighting in was we held was star forts. You understand? Two of the biggest ones we had was Fort Negro, aka, and Fort Gadsden, where they get the Gadsden flag from, which is the yellow flag with the green snake. Don't tread on me. This was Fort Gadsden. And there's a Seminole soldier protecting the refugees. So like I said, the Salisbury steak shit, the Harriet Tubman shit, all of these niggas. I told you, Frederick Douglass' real family was Moors, but he was one of the sellout niggas. He's the one of the ones that worked to help denationalize and destroy Haiti. He was part of the rework, the reconstructed Congress and all that shit. That's these Negroes. These divine nine niggas, all these types of people. All of them. These were the stateless and refugee and mercenary niggas that came over here to steal our land. And they still trying to do it, like what they doing in LA right now. This is a painting of the battle at Fort it's blown up, but at Fort Negro, as they say. But look. And then this is the uniform of the colonial Marines who was fighting. See the two flags? See that British ensign? And then you see the Moorish flag at the bottom? So again, look up the corpse of the colonial Marines. You know what I'm saying? In the Seminole Wars. That's why they don't teach nobody about the Seminole Wars and all that. Because the United States lost. The United States has basically lost every war that it has ever fought. I'm keeping it real with you. They ain't never won a war yet. Really. They didn't win the war against the British. They didn't win the war against the Barbary. They didn't win the war against the Vietnamese. They didn't win the war against the Afghans. They didn't win the war against the Russians. They didn't win the war against the Koreans. They didn't win. The only one they can maybe claim is World War II, and that was fake. They had to do that to hide the real Moorish Swabians, real Moorish Germans, Aryans that was taking the technology and bouncing. What they was left with was all of the little white niggas that felt like they knew how they could work it. That's why they ushered all of them into the same industries. That's why you can have Von Braun working with Disney. You know what I'm saying? Because all these niggas was ex-prisoners. That's the truth, y'all. All these niggas is ex-prisoners. And we was hard on prisoners. We was not playing with these Negroes. That's why they hate us. That's why everybody hates us, because we had it all. And we shared with them when they know when we shouldn't have done that. We should have just kept sharing with ourselves. But we didn't. And according to the time frame, when you read the story of the Popoval and all of that, it was time for the other hero twin to come up. So we did. But we was brutal till they look at this shit. So when they talk about the human sacrifice and all of that, no, that's what we was doing to them. These was torture methods that was going on to them. These are the real pictures. They wasn't doing this to their own. They was doing this to the interlopers to make it so gruesome to remind them if they ever came back here, this is what would happen to you. They wasn't living like that. How could you have, think about that. How could you have an entire society in which that society kills half of its society through human sacrifice and allow that society to exist for more than a generation? Does that make sense to you? Especially, think about this. You're only killing children. So how does the society still exist? How does that society from ancient times, now we don't know how long the Olmecs and them was out there. So from ancient times all the way up what to the 1900s, these people was sacrificing each other. There would be no people left. No, they were sacrificing a certain group of people. And as you can see, you know who the people is. And so this is how they got their get back when they got in charge. This is why they started doing all of the shit they was doing to us. Because this is the shit we was doing to them. But go around, come around, regardless of who you are. So yeah, this is what's going on, Morris. We were the ultimate military. That's why that's why the majority of people in the military now is melanated people. Is melanated people. Officer class white people. But now they trying to get the army to get more back into the Constitution and the Republic. But now they find that they done Cheetoed these niggas out for over 20 years. They done made these niggas lazy and mess. They can't do no push-up. They can't do nothing. But that don't mean this shit don't go down. They ain't gonna do nothing. You heard? You know how these niggas are with guns? Like I said, there's more guns in America right now than there are in the entire world, y'all. So I wouldn't plan on that invasion anytime soon. Because again, once you engage in something like the shit China is doing, the poking the bear shit, sending people to poison the crops and shit, like that's like little shit. But the minute they really try to turn it up, you understand it's a point of no return, and none of them can afford that right now. That's why they all turning on each other, because they're all prisoners. They're all prisoners. They're all a part of Epstein. They're all in that harem house. You understand? All of them. All of them. That's why everybody now is finally coming out against your peoples over there. Because now everybody realizes that everything that's happening is coming from these people. And why? Because they all got Stockholm syndrome, because they come from a group of people who were perpetual slaves of the entire earth, bro, for generations, to the point that half of these people wasn't even created. They weren't even born after the 1900s. A lot of these niggas was created. So we got to stop expecting them to be human and shit. Anybody have any questions before we close out? Yep. Sarah Bach. Yeah. It's either Bachton or Boctor. Just type in first black girl millionaire, oil baron. It'll come up. Anybody else? Anybody else? Yeah, just right. Oil baroness. At a time, like I said, where black people were supposed to be nothing but dirt, we seem to have had it all then, more than now. So everybody definitely please check out www.aseertheducateers.com if you haven't already. Appreciate you. Definitely check out www.cordobaorganics.com. Definitely appreciate you guys for all the support over the years. Sister worked real hard on it. Um, Also, if you haven't already, definitely subscribe to the ADOT app. Big up to all the ADOTs out there, everybody holding it down, tuning in, seeing stuff with, you know. Thank you. Yes, Sarah Rector. Thank you. Yes. So definitely check that out. Anybody have any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So again, man, I appreciate you guys. Also, you can check out www.ds418 to get your copy of the Darsco 418, world's most dangerous comic book novel, with some new joints to come. Definitely check that out if you haven't already. I appreciate it. And yeah, if you guys have any other questions, hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. And yeah, man, we'll take it from there. All right. If anybody else have any other questions, thank you guys for also dealing with me with the tech. I'm gonna try to use another mic next week. See if that works. Inshallah, it wasn't too bad. All right, guys. So inshallah, next week again. Keep your eyes to the prize, and next week we're gonna get into some other stuff. But thank you guys for the support. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I say the Duketeers. Spread the word. I appreciate you. Peace. Also next week I'm gonna post up info. Check the ADOT app. Those on it. I'm gonna have the info for the event that we'll be doing in Tampa in July. All right. Peace.